very instructive. Senator Young.
Thank you, Chairman, for holding this important hearing. Thank you, gentlemen, for being here. The Panama Canal underpins our current economic strength and national security. When 40% of U.S.-bound container traffic depends on a single waterway, we cannot afford unilateral toll hikes that choke out competition and leave our smaller carriers or our Midwestern exporters on the hook. For instance, in my home state of Indiana, manufacturing firms and farmers rely on consistent, reasonably priced shipping routes to move heavy machinery, auto parts, and ag products like corn and soy. If the Canal Authority's auction system prices them out, the ripple effects on American jobs and supply chains could be devastating. Chairman Sola, given our enormous stake in the canal's operation, do you believe Congress or the FMC should more aggressively use existing legal authorities or even create new legislative tools to block or penalize toll practices that disproportionately harm U.S. shippers and exporters?
Thank you, Senator, for the question. And I grew up in Goodland, Indiana, so that you know.
Fantastic.
I do believe that we should continue to monitor the situation, and if we do need more regulations or statutes, that we would come back to Congress because we get our marching instructions from you. Moving the agricultural products that we get out of the Midwest all over the world and through the country, not only do we focus on the Panama Canal, but we also focus on about $5 trillion worth of goods coming in and leaving the United States here at the Federal Maritime Commission. So it's definitely one of our main concerns.
Well, thank you. I'm not surprised. I always tell people Indiana is a maritime state. If you think about our dependence on the waterways and our shipping lines and all the rest. So you're certainly proving that. But so we will stay in touch, and if you in the future would like to outline any mechanisms or measures that you think would be effective to help ensure fair treatment for our interests, please let me and others on this committee know. When the two Panama Canal Treaties were signed, we lived in a different world, one where Chinese state-backed actors didn't wield strong influence over global infrastructure, and issues like drought were rarely factored into international agreements. As we all know, times have certainly changed, but the United States is still the canal's biggest customer, and quite frankly, we have every right to expect an operational framework that acknowledges our modern security and economic challenges. States like Indiana, with robust exports, feel these impacts, even if we're far from the canal itself. Chairman Sola, and then I'll allow others to respond. In light of evolving conditions, especially increased foreign investment from China, do you believe the U.S. should explore a more comprehensive update or supplemental protocols to these decades-old treaties?
I definitely believe that we should support U.S. investment, and not having an ambassador there for so long has been detrimental to us, especially as the case that I just mentioned earlier, where we didn't have an ambassador and we had a U.S. company in need of service. So however we can promote U.S. investment, especially in infrastructure, this is where China is definitely beating us with the Belt and Roads, where they understand that. And I believe that, our Exim Bank and our DFC is so limited in what they can do by the restrictions that they have, that we're not able to invest into infrastructure like we should.
I hope the administration will prioritize this ambassador spot as nominations are made. I hope we'll prioritize it in the Senate. My colleagues on the Democratic side of the aisle will be warm to that nomination and moving it quickly. Something both parties, frankly, have fallen short on in recent years is prioritizing these. But other comments, Mr. Maffei?
Yeah, well, Senator, it won't surprise you since you and I served together in the House that I actually am pretty bipartisan. I agree with the chairman on what he said. I will say that that certainly we need to look at other kinds of ways to get U.S. companies in positions where they can truly compete with the Chinese and some of these things. And blaming it all on Panama, it really misses the point. I've seen the same thing in Greece, where Greece didn't want to give the concession of its largest port to a Chinese company, but because of its financial difficulties, it was getting pressure from international organizations such as the IMF, Europe, and even maybe some in the United States to do so. So I just ask you to look at that. And I do want to say one quick thing. You're right about the cost, and as I said before you were able to get here, the Panamanians are making far more on their canal than they ever had before. That's not necessarily a bad thing as long as it's going to the right place, but where they're really making the money is on these auctions, and that is why it remains a concern of mine, I'm sure the chairman's, and that is where we are looking at potentially are using our authority under Section 19 of the Merchant Marine Act, where we could, if we can show that it is basically a problem with the foreign trade of the U.S. It's interfering with foreign trade of the U.S. There are certain things that we can do, but I do think we need more information before we could make that kind of action. But we're certainly working on that, and we do have that authority at the FMC.
Thank you, and good to see you again, sir. Mr. Kremick, did you have anything?
We'd had discussed, Senator Young, some of the infrastructure projects to make the canal more sustainable and viable, and how the United States, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, has already done some feasibility reviews of those projects. So that would certainly be something to take a look at to make the canal, viable with an additional supplies of fresh water.
Thank you. Chairman?
Senator, if I may.
Sure.
Senator, sorry, it's I'm on Zoom. You spoke about renegotiating the treaties, and
Yes.
I think one of the things about treaties as an instrument of governance is they're not very flexible, and they don't really have automatic processes typically for easy amendment. And before this hearing, I spent a fair amount of time reviewing the ratification hearings in the Senate in 1978. And back then, the principal concerns the Senate was concerned with then is the Soviets and Cuba, actually, not China and Iran. So the world has changed a huge amount. China's role has changed a huge amount. And of course, back then, 1999 seemed very far off. 2025 seemed a world away. And as a result, I think it is useful to revisit treaties and seek to renegotiate them, to update them to sort of current events. And of course, the United States has a considerable amount of leverage it can use to seek such additional protocols to modernize these treaties to current events and current geopolitical realities.
Makes great sense, and I'm glad you spoke up. Thank you, Mr. Kantorovich. Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. I want to ask a couple of